and welcome to our third COP28 update from the Wildlife Trusts. You'll have seen in the media over the last couple of days that there's been a lot of wrangling around what the COP president has or hasn't said about what climate science is or isn't saying about the need to reduce fossil fuels, and that will keep rumbling on, I suspect. But this week also we've got reports coming out showing that greenhouse gas emissions are as high as they've ever been in 2023, and that global temperature is still tracking very high compared to last year and compared to all other previous records that have been broken before. So it's quite a depressing and critical backdrop to these negotiations, which are coming up to their first rest day tomorrow, Thursday. The major text that everyone's been waiting for appeared on Tuesday. This is the global Stocktake negotiating text. And what this is the illustration of where all countries are at on their commitments to do more to reduce their fossil fuels and to adapt to climate change. That text is currently 30 pages long, so it's way too long, with lots and lots of different manifestations of different paragraphs. But there's a few interesting things to pull out for you. One is that parties are very eager to point out that 10 years ago we were talking about global temperature increases of way over 4 degrees, of up to 4.8 degrees. And the text has noted that and said now we're talking about global temperature increases of up to 2.5 degrees, and how much progress there has been therefore on climate action globally to see that difference. Now that's true, and that's good to see that text in the negotiating document. But what's also happened over that time is we've seen the impacts of climate change at lower levels of global warming probably becoming much more severe than we would have predicted 10 years ago. So although that prediction of global temperature increase has come down, the impacts associated with every degree of global warming have gone up. So we're not necessarily in a much better position than we were before, although obviously that is still progress. The other thing to note about this text, again, you'll have seen in the media, and this is what the focus is there, that there is text on phasing down, phasing out fossil fuels, and that's what everyone's going to be watching as the big ticket item. But obviously I was looking for the nature coverage in this text as well, and there is a good amount of discussion in there about both protecting natural ecosystems, protecting nature, nature's role in addressing climate change, and marine and coastal habitats get their own paragraph as well, which is really good to see. The other piece of text that we're particularly interested in is the negotiating text on the global goal on adaptation. And this hasn't been in the spotlight at COP so far. Loss and damage is arguably taking some of the attention away from adaptation, but it's good to see that text coming out as well. Again, it's quite long and full of different options, but again, it contains quite a decent section on nature. It mentions nature-based solutions, the need to conserve and recover nature, to address adaptation, as well as making sure that we're reducing and minimising climate change impacts on nature itself. That is all still to be played for, so that text is still an option, and we'll see whether that stays in or not. But the other really interesting part of the global goal on adaptation is parties are starting to make progress on actually defining what the goal is. And this is something that people who've been working in adaptation have been disagreeing on for well over 20 years. It's quite hard to define outcomes on adaptation because it's a process of becoming more resilient to the impacts of climate change. But there's a good amount of text on outcomes, which the UK would be signing up to, along other parties, and a good amount of text on the sorts of processes that the UN expects countries to take to address adaptation, including creating climate change risk assessments and adaptation plans that are equitable, take into account the threats to nature, and that embed adaptation in all policies and programmes, which arguably is not something any country has managed to do yet, including the UK. And finally, not such good news on food systems. The working group that was looking at transforming food systems, the negotiating text around that, unfortunately they hit a roadblock, and that whole agenda item has been shunted into the talks which will take place as they normally do in Bonn next summer. So that's really disappointing to see that there hasn't been much more progress on resilient and transformative food systems that we would have seen at this COP. Tomorrow is a rest day for all of the delegates. I'm sure a lot of them will be trying to catch up on a lot of missed sleep over this week. And we'll be back on Friday to see how those negotiating texts are shaping up. to see what other finance commitments have been made, because we're seeing still all through the week lots and lots of new climate finance commitments. I'll see you again on Friday.